Hi everyone, emotionally vulnerable foreigner here. So the Swedish government decided to take 2 million in tax money and spend it on labeling me racist. I'm not even kidding.
Sweden's so-called Department of Social Protection hired a British think tank with Russian connections to put together a report on how yours truly, Sweden's unofficial tour guide, along with popular YouTuber Paul Joseph Watson, are a foreign threat towards Swedish democracy.
Well, imagine my shock.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, all I did was go and get a job, so why do you hate immigrants that work so much, Sweden? You socialists got a really perverse definition of foreign threat. You know that? So I can't go and get a job because it's bad for your victim narrative? That's kind of racist.
Now, as far as the report, I mentioned about 6 times, and their alleged proof of disruption is just saying things that I can back up through mainstream media sources on my channel as well as Paul's channel.
Well, imagine my shock.
Not really as dangerous as it's made out to be. All that happened here is that they seem to think simply stating things is enough to prove them.
But I guess that's what happens when you hire drunk Russians to do your propaganda for you. Try hiring a drunk Bosnian instead.
Speaking of which, the authors of the report, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, is registered in Britain as a charity, but really just teams up with George Soros to produce anti-citizen propaganda. For a report to qualify as research, you need to attain certain criteria, yet here there's no peer review and their analysis consists of reading tweets. So more than anything, this is offensive towards Swedish taxpayers, but it doesn't end there. This inherently flawed kindergarten-level report is used by Sweden's government agency as recommendation to carry out school campaigns and make it harder for alternative media to prosper financially. This appears to be a global agenda, since the same organization is advocating something similar in America through their mainstream media. And when you look at the specific people behind the report, they're funded and legitimized by 2 Soviet investors whose think tank got accused of being Russian spies. So clearly, I don't get paid enough for this. And maybe my underachieving views and popularity, along with non-existent channel notifications, all have something to do with this exact same government agency being allowed to work with YouTube to decide what videos get censored or not out of concern for Swedish politics. Or maybe that counts as a socially irresponsible, toxic conspiracy theory. And so this will go into a government report somewhere, used as an argument for how I'm destabilizing the trust in our social democratic, social democracy system. See, that's pretty much what they're trying to get at, because if they can just label you pretty much terrorist, then they can shut you down using all their institutions. That's why government technology and the emerging surveillance state is relevant topics to all citizens who enjoy drinking beer, swearing, and reading whatever weird shit they want to consume on the internet. In Sweden, having a personal opinion counts as a conspiracy theory. Swedish people won't believe anything unless it comes from an official government report. So in order for them to believe that the government is doing something wrong, the government has to write a report where they admit to having done something wrong. And so you can see it's just kind of obnoxious to deal with their cultural programming when all you're really trying to do is just comment on news. You get a lot of weird complaints about being biased just because you're not arguing against yourself. When I know for a fact that Slavic people don't believe in self-contempt, otherwise known as cucking. I leave my sources and obvious bias linked in the video description. Clearly you're a moron if you keep thinking I'm trying to be an objective scientist here. I couldn't be more transparent with what my ideology is. That's why I made a video called My Ideology, so you can see my ideological biases and where I'm coming from. I'm very sorry to claim any kind of achievement here, but I kind of feel like that's a little bit more honest than the mainstream media claiming they have no bias. At least I'm making it clear I'm not the only person you should be watching. You need to complete this with other different ideological perspectives and sources. That's kind of implied. In the report, they make a big deal of me and Paul talking before the election, as well as my video on potential election fraud taking place, which is just so insane. We don't even have anonymous elections in Sweden, and yet you freak out at me mentioning what's worrisome about our election system. Because I want to improve it and ask people to gather proof if they see anything suspicious and then report it to the authorities? That's your idea?
of disruption. That's the complete opposite of trying to undermine trust in democracy. That's actually trying to take an active measure to make sure that every citizen is taking their legal responsibilities and counteract corruption. On numerous occasions, I've advocated for more referendums and more direct democracy in order to counteract boiling frog resentment and political polarization. It's pretty obvious where I stand if you actually watch a video instead of just getting triggered by the first 3 minutes of it. You know, the irony is kind of mind-blowing because I just released a video on Sweden's cozy ties with various communist dictatorships and how social justice warriors are Soviet-programmed NPCs as part of post-World War II propaganda. And the reason nearly 90% of young people in both Sweden and Britain don't know about the horrors of communism is because the left took over the institutions and are now using our tax money to label us enemy of the state if we start up a YouTube channel where we read information that anyone can find on the internet. Just because I add jokes to it, I'm a terrorist all of a sudden? Come on!
Bog, that the Kosny Pichka.
Considering Russia is still basically the Soviet Union and SJWs are Soviet-programmed NPCs, who's the actual Russian threat here? The immigrant advocating law and order to differentiate between good immigrants and bad immigrants? Or the identity politics hate preachers making everyone resent each other?
Clearly, this Swedish department abusing your tax money is just pissed about this old video roast I made about them, where I read that notorious pamphlet of theirs and make the exact same point. Post-colonialism, intersectionality, and PC culture causes a lot more resentment than a group of people who believe it's okay to joke about each other. It's basic human psychology, and if you look at the practical nature we're living in, it's pretty clear who's acting like a Russian instigator.
Let's just put it like this. I want a nation with a good patriotic spirit and people who are willing to defend this country in the form of a strong military. Leftists want gender studies. Gee, I wonder what makes a country easier to invade. And the Swedish head of the unit responsible for this reportion, which is an abortion report, might have actually committed a serious crime in doing this extremely sloppy of a job. But I guess nobody cares since this article dropped and yet he's not being prosecuted. So this is what it's like to live in satire. This is literally the SJW Eden. You know, what really pisses me off most here is, once again, as per usual, nobody wants to read my sources! Government agencies in America, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China, and Thailand all warn their citizens of traveling to Sweden, given the amount of robberies and thefts that have occurred towards their citizens, as well as a general risk of gang crime and terrorism, given the number of violence-supporting Muslim extremists have increased from hundreds to tens of thousands in just a few years.
Det finns tiotusentals salafister I Sverige.
Now, as the unofficial travel guide of Sweden, obviously these governments I listed read my sources and chose to do the responsible thing, which is advise their citizens to not be naive when traveling Sweden, due to real-life crime statistics and reports from reality. But instead, Sweden's Department of Social Protection criticized this and complained that the Sweden image has become too negative. Quote, "Oh, there's so much exaggeration going on. One car fire becomes several car fires," they said, even though car fires have literally increased 300% the past 20 years. Oh no, facts! Holy cow, that's so subversive of me. Jiminy Jilliker, Stallerino. So in part thanks to me, the citizens of other countries can remain safer, all because I informed them about the result of your politics. How is this a problem? I mean, I do understand it's a huge anxiety issue for the politicians who fail to fix these problems, but nobody cares about you. Society is bigger than you. You know, the only thing that's needed for a Sweden image to improve is for our politicians to just admit all our problems in our society and then solve them. Instead, we've been stuck at square one for the past 30 years, so you've officially lost the right to complain. We gave you so much time to listen, and all you did was pretend that our country was perfect. And since you made yourselves impossible to reason with, I just had to step outside of your court as the jester and turn Sweden into a global meme.
Hey!
I'm not happy about it,
but it is what it took for Swedish people to wake up. When the whole world starts pointing and laughing, it's hard for the collective to maintain their psychosis domestically. So blind spots start showing and illusions start breaking apart, at which point hopefully healing can begin. But instead you're stuck bitching about how people discussing reality is bad for our economy. No, what's bad for the economy is your politics, because whether or not I'm talking on social media, Swedish citizens still can't get their welfare, their psych ward, and their pensions. Because you spend our resources on raising salaries for politicians while overpopulating the infrastructure. So it's never really been a race thing. None of us are hostile towards immigrants as people. We just don't like the guys in suits making decisions that only benefit them. In this context, a tad of humor and a whole lot of honesty goes a long way, which is why my channel is exceptionally valuable in this country. I read more weird shit than anyone, then I bring back a little piece from that void and present it to you. At which point you consider it to be news, while I just perceive it as being a flip-flopping janitor, since I would have been doing this anyway. So there's a social value here called autism, which you pay me money for, because people send me massive amounts of fan mail on how I red-pilled them and gave them the courage to stand up against crowd. Which the government doesn't like, but they don't speak for the people. And the Swedes want their foreigners. The Swedes need their foreigners. So let the Swedish people receive and impound all that foreigner. Just read my sources, okay? I spent a lot of time researching this. Okay, I spent a lot of time researching this, and it's not all easy to come by, you know? So just give it a look, because that's where all the... The video is performance art around the sources in order to make the information so much juicier. So you can just slip right in.
You're in shock now. I don't want you to feel any pain.
I'm trying to make you smarter, asshole.
If they can shut me down for talking like a normal person, then they're gonna be able to do it to you as well. Don't let that happen. Never surrender. Because they can't keep me quiet. Just like they can't keep this quiet.